Assalamualaikum. Good morning to distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fariza and I will be your MC for today. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us at the Liberalism Conference, Trends, Challenges and Future Prospects, jointly organized by IDEAS and the Institute of Asia-Pacific Studies at the University of Nottingham. Without further ado, allow me to welcome Mr. Saiful Jan, Chief Executive of IDEAS, to deliver his opening remarks.
Right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. Selamat pagi. Terima kasih. I'll do this in English. So a few people have been asking whether this will be in English or in Malay. I will do the speech in English because there are people who are from outside of Malaysia. But the conference is actually bilingual. You know, it's a liberal conference. You use whatever language you want to use. There's freedom of choice as long as people can understand you. Let me say thank you very much to everyone for coming to this event this morning. I know it's very precious Saturday morning, with the haze and all that, and all the semangat still left over from the 16th of September rally. I hope none of you were there. But I didn't say that, but there we go. And thank you very much for coming. I hope you can stay till the end of the event. We have a very good lineup of speakers and topics to be discussed. I also want to say thank you very much to all the speakers for willing to come and speak on this topic in particular. And I have to mention this to clarify any misunderstanding that may arise. In particular, I want to say thank you to someone who's not here, and that is Dato' Ibrahim Ali from Perkasa. And the reason for that is we invited him. He immediately agreed to come and speak. But he also told us right from the beginning that on the same date that we organized, so today, this week, he is also scheduled to be abroad, but that was not confirmed yet. He agreed for us to use his name on the poster. We immediately produced the posters after he agreed. But within maybe 1 or 2 weeks of us producing the poster, he informed us that the engagement abroad has now been confirmed. And I said to him, in order to avoid any accusation that that he has chickened out and all that, but all these things keep coming up, and I really don't want that to happen. So I said to him, is it okay if we use his name, we just leave his name on the poster? But on the agenda, we clearly specify that somebody else will be replacing him, Dato' Rohani Ahmad, who will be, I don't know if he's here yet, but he will be here representing Perkasa. But Dato' Ibrahim Ali is not here, and I think he is the only one who has changed the program. He is the only, that is the only change in the program. Everybody else is as scheduled. So I really want to thank him for allowing us to use his name, despite the fact that he is not coming and is willing enough. He's quite supportive of the conference, to be honest, which I think many people find surprising. So that's a special mention that I must make to avoid people accusing him of running away or not turning up or dishonoring his promise. He did not do that, and it is our understanding, our request to him to keep his name on the poster. I also want to thank, by the way, I have to mention this. On the 16th of September, we organized a National Unity Conference. And someone who attended the conference produced this poster, Bangkit Melayu, Konferensi Tajaan Yahudi untuk hapuskan Melayu dan Islam. And Trisha has suddenly been turned into agent Cina DAP. Kuli diperkudakan oleh Cina, komplot memusnahkan raja dan bangsa Melayu. And then there's one of our participants here, Calvin, there in the orange shirt. You joined Amanah or something, no? Not yet, no, okay. And asking, so he went up to read the declaration from that conference. And the poster, very quickly produced the poster. This was released on the same day of the conference. Kenapa dia yang naik pentas? Mana anak Melayu? Melayu jadi hamba kepada Cina kah? I never realized you're my boss, Calvin. But so, in order to avoid posters like this from being produced, let me say that this conference has nothing to do with the Jews or DAP. I really do not like the idea that DAP is getting free credit from the conferences that we organize when we never took any money from them. I wish they pay some royalty to us for this free publicity. This conference is not to be blamed on the Jews or the Americans. We should blame them on this conference on the Germans. So because it is fully funded by the Frederick Naumann Foundation, to whom I'm very thankful for. And just in case you're wondering, let me just absolve you from all this curiosity that you may have. Curiosity kills a cat. They pay 50,000 ringgit for the conference, which is a big amount, and I'm really grateful and thankful for the sponsorship from Frederick Naumann Foundation. So bersyukurlah rakyat Malaysia atas tajaan yang diberikan oleh all the liberal funders. So thank you very much to Frederick Naumann Foundation, and of course Nottingham University as well. Dr. Michael Connors will be speaking after me. They've been really helpful in helping us in devising the program, designing the program, and so on. I just want to explain one thing in these welcoming remarks. We decided to accept the offer, the suggestion from Frederick Naumann Foundation to organize a conference. We decided to accept the idea and to organize a conference because there have been a lot of misunderstanding about this concept of liberalism. We hear people talking about liberalism, and they come to very different conclusion to the extent that sometimes I always wonder whether we're talking about the same thing or not. Some people say liberalism is about freedom of choice. I say liberalism is is my ability to make my own choices about whether or not to wake up at 5 in the morning and go to the mosque for the subuh prayer. Whereas some people say liberalism is about ignoring religion and destroying your identity, about being kuda tunggangan DAP. Since when is DAP is a liberal party? But I don't know. This is the weird thing about liberalism in Malaysia. People use the same word to refer to many different concepts and many different ideas. And we decided to hold this event to bring together people who have interest in the concept. This is not a conference to, we're not attempting to give you a textbook definition of what liberalism is. Instead, it is a conference to debate the idea. And we invited people from various different groups. There are some who could not make it, but we did invite them, people from JAKIM. We invited JAKIM. We invited a few of the Majlis Agama Islam as well, and many other groups. Of course, some are not willing to come and speak. Some just could not make it. Some don't have the suitable speakers to address the topic, and so on. But the idea is for us to come, discuss, and debate the concept, and then hopefully come out a little bit more enlightened than before. In the hope that when we discuss the issue, when we discuss the topic in the future, it will be based on more enlightened knowledge rather than based on what you read on Facebook, Twitter, even though some of them are really good, but they're not always that reliable, especially when they come from people who start with the preconceived ideas and the notion that it's wrong from the beginning. So let's try to make this as healthy, as civil, and as heated as possible. I do hope to hear people disagreeing with the speakers. I do hope people will agree with the speakers as well. If everybody disagrees, then that will be fun to watch. But let's have that conversation, and hopefully moving forward we can continue to have that conversation on this topic as well. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to have a few more opportunities to speak and hopefully make more remarks later on. But let me just stop there and give the mic back to Fariza. Thank you very much.
The Liberalism Conference would not have been possible without the support of the Institute of Asia and Pacific Studies at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia campus. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Connors, former director of the Institute of Asia Pacific Studies, to deliver his welcoming address.
Thank you very much, and may I affirm all of the thanks that one expressed, and I won't repeat them, except to say that to acknowledge Ideas as the lead organiser for this event, with us as a supporter. But I'd like to note too a number of student volunteers from Nottingham who are here today, They came of their own free will, not press-ganged. At least in the boundaries of the campus, they live in a liberal and open environment. And if there are any organisations here looking for talented students for internships, let us know. Thank you. I arrived a little bit late, 10 to 15 minutes before the program started, frazzled and hot and lost, having cursed a lot. My GPS didn't work. And as I was cursing and getting lost, I thought a very apt metaphor for the country right now, and perhaps for the region as a whole in terms of liberalism and its prospects. A great deal of uncertainty about what the prospects are for liberalism, for freedom, and for everything that liberalism means. A conference on liberalism, I think, is extraordinarily important at the moment in the region. For the last few years, I think it's very tangible, a rising feeling of despondency and despair, if you like, about what's happening. There's a sense that the region's on the brink of a massive change, but the direction isn't at all clear. I'd say probably a decade ago, we knew that the liberal moment was in danger. We had foreign policy, securitisation, if you like, of foreign policy, focused on international war against terrorism, and all that meant for national security complexes. We've also seen the rise of China to world historic importance, and of course all that means is an attractive model that is broadly illiberal, I should say. It would appear then that liberalism is now just only one option, not the only option. Now, I'd say in surveying the region, it would be a fair comment to say that there is broad support, for liberal forms of democracy within Southeast Asia. But I don't think it's very evident at the top echelons of government. Rather, it's in social movements, it's in organisations, it's in activism, it's in media, and perhaps the occasional maverick policy activist working with a reforming member of a governing elite. But broadly speaking, liberalism is not terribly well registered in the political sphere, the mainstream official political sphere of Southeast Asia. Now, some people take comfort from the fact that despite that, broadly speaking, Southeast Asian foreign policy is pro-Western in orientation. And indeed, when we look at foreign policy in Southeast Asia, there is, despite public pronounced anti-US sentiment in the public sphere, most governments broadly continue to support the US presence as a security guarantor, and likewise muted support for Japanese rearmament. In other words, there's an international infrastructure of liberalism that would seem to give some hope for the prospects of liberalism, despite the domestic problems. But I'd say we'd have to be careful to misread support for US presence as support for a liberal international order or as affinity with liberal democracy. In a very brilliant book, Natasha Hamilton Hart, a book entitled Hard Interest, Soft Illusions, surveys elite opinion in Southeast Asia on the United States' presence here. She finds that it's not affinity with liberalism that gives elites a pro-Western liberal orientation at the international level, but rather the fact that the American presence is as a soft hegemonic power. And the benefit of a soft hegemonic power, of course, is that the alternative is a strong hegemonic power knocking at your door, whereas the Americans are a distant hegemonic power who obviously need bases, alliances, and dependencies in order to project themselves. So this perhaps accounts for what would be mistaken as a broadly liberal orientation to international affairs, which I think is probably misfounded and which therefore restates the fairly difficult circumstance of liberalism in Southeast Asia. We've also seen the reprisal of themes that were around in the 1980s and 1990s, the Asian values debate. We have advocates now for developmental authoritarianism, advocates, perhaps apologists, those who argue the region rose out of poverty because of the strong heart of authoritarian rule. Excuse me. I have a haze-induced asthmatic cough at the moment, and I've been to the doctor for quite a bit of medicine, nothing works, and the doctor prescribed only one thing that would work: effective and open government and effective public policy. So hopefully one day. This worst apologism for what were themes of Asian values, Master's authoritarianism, comes in the form of a certain scholar bearing the name of Daniel Bell, who's written on China as it transits from communist ideology to rediscovering its Confucian roots. He's proposed that as China exits its communist phase into a more harmonious society, that it consider the role of an upper house, an unelected upper house, a house of the descendants of Confucius, who would rule with wisdom. Now, this is significant for the region. At the moment, what is significant, rather, is if China does make that transition and shreds communist ideology in the next 3 to 5 years, it then starts to become an appropriate or attractive model for cultural forms of authoritarianism. No state in Southeast Asia is rushing towards a communist ideological regime, but many are willing to embrace cultural forms of authoritarianism. So this is another development that I think has to be watched. If I may say a few things about Thailand. Recently, Thailand aborted the constitution that had been drafted. And one element of that new constitution that was aborted was similarly a house of elders, an idea that suggests that there's something in the wisdom of the aged who imbibe the culture can wisely steer the nation towards a better end. Now, Thailand, we all know, has been racked by a very protracted and profound crisis that actually raises questions about the future of liberalism in the region in general. It used to be the case that Thailand was the leader for liberal democracy. Now the question is it the leader towards new forms of authoritarianism in the region? How to explain that story very briefly and what it might mean for the region as a whole? We've seen a clash between what some scholars call Pluto-populism, a billionaire and the masses fighting what I call royalist liberals and royalist reactionaries and military elite. And that clash ended in, of course, a coup d'etat. What's really significant here is to explain how Thailand got from 1997, a prized constitution, a liberal constitution that the liberals in the region would have loved to have been kind of emulated in their own form in their own countries. How did it get from that to 2006, the coup, and now to 2015 with another 2 years of military rule? We see that Thailand's liberal constitution lacked a broad liberal constituency, people sharing liberal values, people protecting liberal values. And what we saw was a strongman prime minister enabled by a new constitution to ride rough over the independent agencies of the state, to trample on human rights, state agencies engaging in state-sanctioned murder, and then tragedy to farce, the military intervening as a supposed democratic saviour. And now Thailand is in a swamp of military dictatorship. There's a warning in the experience then. It was a country that had a very strong and robust liberal tradition. Its major liberal party, the Democrat Party, has a sometimes honourable tradition of fighting military dictatorship. It served in government for a number of times. Thai political culture is broadly liberal and pluralistic. There's a sense in which over generations popular movements have embedded in institutions liberal and democratic norms. So the loss of democracy in Thailand is a loss for a region. And how to explain it? I suggested before that constitutions and institutions don't endure if their essential spirit doesn't win a majority of the people. And it's worth remembering that in Thailand, Thaksin's liberal project was broadly supported by the majority of the electorate. So liberalism has to ask itself how it sells itself in the democratic marketplace. Otherwise, it's vulnerable to what is now described as liberal authoritarianism, a desire to move away from electoral democracy because seemingly people are incapable of making the right choices. And what's interesting here is it's liberal to think that if we think historically. Many Liberals across the history of liberalism have always been suspicious of the democratic vote because they've always thought that only rational and able people should be the ones to vote. So I would suggest another theme is the concern of liberalism slipping into pragmatic questions on the purpose and status of democracy in the region. Now, Liberals in Asia work in many odd environments. In very few of them, they're a viable electoral force. We all know that authoritarians have the culture trick, claiming authenticity for their illiberal rule. They say people like to be subject to strong leaders. They're collectivist in orientation, not individualist. Liberals, of course, can also have the culture trick if they try. But I don't think Liberals particularly try very much to take the culture trick very far. They have to make claims about liberal national identities, about the strands of history, language, literature, identity, culture that speak to a liberal disposition. And then Liberals, broadly speaking, we all know this, have to build a broad constituency to embed liberal norms that then will allow a liberal constitution to endure. We're essentially then speaking about the problem of an alternative national identity. But then with that comes a problem of freedom. People choose not to have a liberal national identity. They choose different forms of identity. So a liberal constitution has to accommodate this pluralism. It has to find ways of working with the liberal elements. And in some senses, that's the topic of one of the panels today. Now, I think all that I've said is actually pretty obvious, and in fact it's made real by the fact of today's event. There are many people across the entire region working on that project to build liberal pluralism within the region, but they do so in many different and varied ways across the region according to the political circumstance, of their own country. And they also attempt to engage and work with people who are opposed to liberal values, because frankly, coexistence is necessary. If I've got a few more moments, I'd like to finish with some comments about Malaysia, comments that I hope won't invite a visit from the Immigration Department. I've lived in Malaysia now for 3 years, and I'm still a newcomer to understanding Malaysian politics. I'm a slow learner. I say that about Thai politics as well, having studied the place for 15 years. Countries constantly bewilder us with the choices and the places they go. In regard to Malaysia, I've been particularly interested in moving beyond my focus on liberalism in Thailand, looking at that, and liberalism in international relations, to looking at liberalism in Malaysia. When I began the conversation, I was told there was no liberal word. There was no word for liberalism in Malay. No such word. The word for liberalism in Malay is, I won't inflict my Malay pronunciation on you. Nisa? Is it? My understanding of the word for liberalism is liberalisma. Yeah. A Western word. Now, I came across in my search an article by a chap called Faisal Tairani, if that's how you pronounce his name, a novelist who people may know, written in 2015. The article is called Aku Liberalis, which I think means I am a liberal. Google Translate helped. The article is a response to the idea that you cannot be Islamic and liberal, you cannot be Malay and liberal. And what he brings up in his article is an early attempt to translate Malay words for liberalism or liberality into English. And he had to go back all the way to 1812 and the attempt by an Orientalist known as William Marsden and his publishing of a Malay English grammar and dictionary. In that dictionary, we discover there are indeed Malay words for liberalism and liberality that have long been lost in language. Perhaps, as politics goes, language follows. What were the words? We're told by Tairani that the root Malay word for liberal is murah. My pronunciation is terrible, so I'll say it means cheap now. It's conventionally understood as cheap. But in the idioms and in the verses of the 18th, 17th, 16th century, the word had liberal connotations, and from it were formed abstract nouns such as liberality and a liberal person around Murakan. These words have disappeared, and to me that's a signal of the need to rediscover liberal roots as a strategy of enabling liberalism to reach out to a broader constituency. And I guess and I hope that is what today is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Connors. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're very honored to have His Excellency Mr. Kasit Priomya to deliver the keynote address. But before I welcome him to the rostrum, allow me to introduce him to you. His Excellency Mr. Kasit Priomya is a renowned Thai diplomat serving for 40 years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Kasit holds a bachelor's degree in international affairs from the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University and later completed his master's at the famous Institute of Social Studies, The Hague in the Netherlands. We might ask him later if this is where his liberal leanings come from. His career has been stellar. He has served as an ambassador in the former Soviet Union, Indonesia, Japan, Germany, and the United States, as well as in other places. With that foreign affairs experience, he more recently moved into a career in politics at a time of profound crisis for Thailand's aspiring liberal democracy. Controversially, from 2006, he acted as an informal advisor to the People's Alliance for Democracy, the movement that campaigned against the Thaksin government and its successor parties. Between 2008 to 2011, he served as Foreign Minister for Thailand, appointed by the Democrat Party-led government. In that position, he actively campaigned for a revitalized US-Thai relationship based on liberal principles of international order. That did not stop him from condemning what he saw as a US interference in Thailand's domestic affairs. Kun Kasit is a member of the International Executive Committee at the Council of Asian Liberal Democrats. Ever controversial at home, Mr. Kasit now advocates for major reform before elections are held in Thailand. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency Mr. Kasit Priomya.
Sawadee-kap. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you very much to Ideas and Universities of Nottingham, and behind that, the Frederick Neumann Foundation. It's nice to be doing something when you are out of work, unemployed, by the order of the military government of Thailand. So thank you very much that you have given me the chance to do something useful. Before I left Bangkok for KL yesterday and a few days before that, a couple of friends, including members of my family, asked me, what are you going to do in KL? And I said that I'm coming to KL to attend a conference on liberalism. Some said that, are you kidding? Most of them were smiling and laughing because they thought it was a joke. How can there be liberalism in Southeast Asia and in the Asia-Pacific region? They were not certain that the organizers in KL was really serious, or whether I am also serious in accepting the invitation to come to KL and participate in this liberal conference. And I think that reflects the general feeling of all of us Asians about the very dire existence of liberalism among all of us. It's just like looking out onto the Indian Ocean, searching for a sailing boat with the label liberalism. It would be very difficult indeed to find one. And let me illustrate by taking you along the Silk Route of the old days. But instead of moving from the east to the west, let me move from the western part of Asia to the Pacific. And you look at Central Asian republics, except maybe to a certain extent Kyrgyzstan. The rest of them are autocratic democracy. I was ambassador to Moscow in the early 1990s, and I did present my credential as ambassador also to Kazakhstan, to the current president, Razayev. He was big when Kazakhstan was part of the Soviet Union, and when Kazakhstan gained independence. To these very days, he is still the president of Kazakhstan, not as the Secretary General of the Communist Party, but as the elected president, I think 95%, 90% of the votes and so on. And that is a reflection that how come liberal democracy with elections and parliamentary system and so on, you still end up with one particular president for almost 40 years. Fully elected, but very autocratic, very authoritarian. And that's, I think, the general picture in the whole of Central Asia. Then you move further to Afghanistan. You have elections, but you have tribalism. And then you have extreme religious elements, the Taliban and so on. And in Iran, you have the theocratic democracy, combining religious affairs with the worldly global political affairs. Again, more or less an authoritarian, almost totalitarian, democratically elected government. Then you move to Pakistan. You have the military establishment, a state unto itself. You have tribalism on the northwestern part of Pakistan. And among all the provinces is the question of ethnic. The Baluchistan, the Sindhis, the Punjabi, the Pathans, and so on, in a very much of a democratic setting, but not quite viable. India prides itself of being the foremost democratic regime for a long, long time. But I think the Hindu nationalism is something that one has to be a bit concerned. And the trend is going in that direction. So is the Chinese Communist Party, discarding internationalism of Marxism and so on. And the Chinese are becoming more nationalistic, aggressive, expansionist in design and intention. Nepal has elected Maoist government, very confused of what to do with themselves. You cannot combine Marxism with an open liberal democracy. Bhutan offers some light of democracy, but the treatment of the Nepalese minorities is not quite welcome. Down south in Maldives, it's an authoritarian presidential system trying to get rid of the former president as much as possible, denying the basic freedom and pluralism. And in Bangladesh, it's the two families of the two ladies trying to kill each other. The one in power keep on putting charges to the opposition. One of the leaders, deputy leaders of the Awami, the opposition, was former permanent secretary, a colleague of mine as ambassador. We were together in Germany. He just came out of jail 4 months. What was the charge? It was alleged that because while he was organizing his son's marriage, there was protest on the street. Then the police arrested him. I had to charge you, sir, because we were told by the government they have to charge you for instigating protests and so on, for doing nothing and then organizing a marriage for his son. He was put to jail for 4 months and just came to Bangkok. We just had a talk, breakfast and so on. But that's the situation in Bangladesh. And in Myanmar, what do we have now? Extreme Buddhist movement with all the political parties closing their eyes, the parliament doing nothing. And the Rohingyas are being treated as non-citizens. Their rights, fundamental rights, are being taken away. And Thailand, we have a military government. I will come back to that. Malaysia, I'm a bit concerned about the rising ethnicity in the politics of Malaysia, supported by the current government. I'm so sorry to say that. I hope the leadership here will not allow that to happen. Because when one watches CNN and BBC and so on, it's about one Malaysia. At the same time, the Najib government has been promoting movement of the Muslim moderates. I hope what you present to the world is really linked in tangible manner to the reality at home on the street, that you remain a pluralistic society, inclusive, and move Malaysia forward to 2020 as a developed country. But with the happenings of the last few days and so on, I do not see that achievement or that objective will be achieved, because Malaysia would be bogged down with the ethnic question and so on, and the reduction of the inequalities would not come forth. Government would be spending more time trying to pacify the socio-ethnic conflicts and so on. Singapore, I think the people still opted for the material well-being, less of the freedom. It's the choice of the Singaporeans. But I hope the opposition parties do make a better offer to the people. Because what they were trying to say to the people, they were opted out preemptive by the PAP, that better housing, less importation of professionals, foreign professionals and so on. They have not said a word about liberalism and pluralism as a platform or as a campaign, a policy platform to offer to the people. I hope the opposition will do more about freedom and so on, and not only to concentrate on the material things which the government in being could overcome the difficulties. Indonesia is getting a lot of acclaims worldwide. But to be a Buddhist in Indonesia, you cannot say that I am a Buddhist in Indonesia. There is that inherent fear of saying publicly that I am a Christian or Buddhist because of that Islamic dominance, in spite of the fact that Indonesia have achieved tremendous progress in terms of freedom, participatory politics, decentralization, and so on. I hope there will be more acceptance of the pluralism and the inclusiveness and the expression of the freedom of beliefs and religious affiliation. Then we move up to the northeast. Of course, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea have achieved full democratic polity. And Taiwan has a foundation that's helping us, like the Frederick Neumann Foundation, trying to spread the belief in liberalism, liberal democracy, and so on. Surprisingly, the Japanese political parties are very domestic oriented. They have not come out to help fellow Asian countries to move towards the liberal ideas. The Japanese for the past 60, 70 years have been spending a lot of their time on the economic activities, investment, economic cooperation and so on, but not on the intellectual side of it. I hope that they would come out more and more and using their resource and experience to share with the rest of the ASEAN countries, the Asian countries that would like to become democratically oriented in thinking and in design and in practice. Mongolia is shedding some light and I think encouragement to the rest of us, hemmed between the Russian Federation and China. There is blossoming of democracy in Mongolia. So in short, looking out onto the sea, the picture of liberalism is not quite encouraging. And there is more illiberalism than liberalism. Illiberalism in the form of autocracy, authoritarianism, totalitarianism, nepotism, like down in Sri Lanka a few years back, the former president was defeated. He could not get his party the majority because people, the Sri Lankan, are averse to authoritarian elected presidency or government and so on. Then there is cronyism, money politics, populism, and so on. Why is it so that there is more illiberalism than liberalism in the whole of the Asia-Pacific continent? I think there are maybe two explanations. One is intentional. Let me put the emphasis on the word intentional. And second one is by the socio-cultural structure of that particular society. On the first point, when I said intentional, because the elected government and the president and so on come to power by democratic means. But once in office, they turn illiberal, they turn despotic in order to perpetuate their power, their length in the office and so on. And you see this in the whole of Central Asia. Elected to become illiberal, to become totalitarian or authoritarian and so on. Maldives, the case. Sri Lanka a few years ago was the case. Bangladesh, definitely. In Thailand, the past 10, 12 years was the case. And so that was intentional by the elected leaders that once in office, I hold on to power. Power is my monopoly. Then the second one is more because of the traditional practices inside each of the society. And I would like to cite the example of Thailand, that we ended the absolute monarchy in 1932, and we opted for parliamentary democracy. So for the past 83 years, we have been struggling to become a full-fledged, mature parliamentary democracy. But in between, we have about 20 coup d'etats and 20 constitutions, up and down, so many protests on the streets. Why is it so that the rationality of liberalism and liberal democracy, the rules of law, check and balance, separation of power, decentralization, transparency, accountability, individualism, freedom of expression, various forms of human rights, and so on. All of these beautiful words have been stipulated in the Constitution, series of constitutions and so on. Why are these beautiful words have not been translated into successful practices? What's wrong with the Thai society? And I said that I tend to see that what's wrong with the Thai society, because all of these, the rational ideas and principle of liberalism is being juxtaposed or stood in a sort of a confrontational manner with the Thai traditional practice, belief, and so on of patron-client relationship, patronage system. When we were young throughout, we were told to respect the elders. And the elders do have the obligation to help us. If the elders were men or people of morality, then the treatment and the help, the assistance and the cooperation would be fair and would move the society or the communities forward. But if you were to have the elders without the morality, then the patronage system, patron-client relationship, would turn into a cronyism of only helping the few discriminate against the other. And inside the Thai society of modern history of the past 80 years, in spite of the fact that we have Human Rights Commission, Anti-Money Laundering, Anti-Corruption, Office of the Ombudsman, Independent Election Commission, Independent Audit Committee, Independent Special Investigation Department, Office of the Attorney General. We have all the garments, all the fabrics of an open, liberal, democratic entity. What I think Finland has, we have. We even have constitutional court. We have administrative court. All the things that the Frederick Neumann Foundation has been teaching us for the past 50 years, we have adopted and accepted them and put in our constitutions and put into practice. We set up all of these constitutions and so on. But sadly, each of the constitution is being influenced by the traditional practice of patron-client, of familial relationship, of which school you go, which university you go, in which class, which region you come. All of these come and influence the selection processes. So you do not have the best of the people to fill in all of these democratic institutions. It's who you are the friends of whom at that time, whether the Prime Minister who is a general today or yesterday and so on. It's a familial type of networking that have, I think, filled in all the positions inside the political regime, political parties, inside the government, in the various independent institutions and so on. Is being influenced by the concept of the patron-client, cronyism and so on. And that somewhat somehow have destroyed and undermined the progress towards a full-fledged democracy, which we thought, and I think Professor Connor rightly said so, that by 1997, I thought, and many of us thought, that we have achieved it, we have made it as a full-fledged democratic country with the most liberal constitution, and all the fabrics and garments of the liberal institution were put in place in Thailand. 1997, and I was ambassador at that time to Germany. And many of my contemporaries, other ambassadors, Thai ambassadors around the world, we more or less said the same thing, that we were so proud to represent the Kingdom of Thailand at that time, because we were an open society, very democratic one. Freedom of expression was second to none. More and more participatory politics. The government under Mr. Chuan Lik Pai of the Democratic Party was very clean. And it's such a pride for a diplomat to be able to represent his own country and to say it with pride, with conviction, with passion, that I am representing a democratically elected government and a very open Thai society. And I think we were on the road up. We were the pride, the achievement. We were the students with an A+ in the eyes of Washington, D.C. at that time. Then by the year 2001, Mr. Thaksin came into power. Then the rationality of the liberal democratic entity of Thailand was being eroded by cronyism, patron-client. He appointed his cousin as the army chief. His cousin as the army chief. He put all of his police classmates from the police academy even to head the lottery bureau of Thailand. So it's cronyism at its zenith, at its best, and so on. And then the erosion of all the democratic fabrics of the Thai society. And coupled with populist policy measures, the democracy of Thailand became a personality cult type of democracy. Follow the leader, the largest of the budget being given through the populist policy measures. And for the past 12 years that where we are, or we have been most of the time on the streets. I am not a stranger when I heard about the red and the yellow rallies in Kuala Lumpur. I feel quite at home in this and so on. But don't turn the rallies into an ethnic question. That would be dangerous. We have seen this in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya. Please, I do beg all of you, my dear Malaysian friends, I have been here so many times and so on. Coming here just like a second home. I don't find myself as a stranger. I do believe that. And I don't want the ethnic question to be the rule of the game here. I think the politics of compromise is very, very important. The political leadership has to take the governance into consideration. That's very important. And I think anything happen to Malaysia, I think that would be the end of the ASEAN community. Without Malaysia helping to lead, it would be difficult for ASEAN to move forward. The joint communique of the ASEAN Foreign Minister meeting in KL in July was like a non-paper, no one reads it. And yet, Malaysia was in the chair, too much bogged down by the domestic situation, has no time for anything else. Cannot lead ASEAN. And then I think that is not good for all of us. So, let me repeat that liberalism has not moved forward. Liberalism, at least from the Asian perspective, in the form of parliamentary democracy, multi-parties. Since the end of the Second World War, or since the independences of all the countries around here, the past 50, 60 years, have been thwarted by the ambitions, wrongful ambitions of the political leaders to use the election as a means to become autocratic, authoritarian, and corrupted on the way. While at the same time also, the fight between the rationalities of liberal ideas of check and balance were being hemmed in and somewhat opposed by the traditional practices of parent-client relationship. And I think there must be a declaration of independence by all the liberals in the whole of the Asia Pacific continent that let's move on the rationality of liberal principles and get rid of all authoritarian leaders, that's one point. But second, to get rid of the traditional practices within ourselves. Then by that time, then I think liberalism could take a foothold in the Asia Pacific continent. Okay. And how to do that? I think the networking inside Southeast Asia in particular and Asia Pacific region in general, the networking would be very important. At the moment, there is only one body in the whole of the Asia Pacific region that is promoting liberal ideas, liberal democracy, namely the Councils of Asian Liberals and Democrats based in Manila, Thailand. CALD. They will have executive board meeting, I think, in November in Mongolia. Mongolian party and is in the chair of Carl now. So Carl could help to do the networking, could link to ideas and to other foundations and political movements in the Asia-Pacific region. The networking would be very, very important. And I think there is a need to maybe to sit down together among all the various think tanks of the liberal ideas of the Asia-Pacific region, some political parties of the liberal school, and organizations such as CALD, and to see what we can do together to move forward the liberal ideas. Second, I think in each of the country, there must be the promotion of knowledge about democracy, liberalism, and so on, as opposed to socialism, nationalism, populism, whatever, and so on. Promotion by the parties concerned, at least maybe 3 parties in Malaysia. The Democrat Party, Anwar Ibrahim Party, and I think the Gerakan Party from Penang base. The networking with all the universities would be important because there have not been much of the education on liberalism and democracy, or namely the civic and political education. We do not have similar setup as what the German government and I think society has, namely the political parties' foundations. In the United States, both the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, they also have their own foundations to promote democracy and liberal ideas and so on. So in each of our country, we have to have the education on politics, on democracy, and the networking would be very, very important. The media should have to come in and so on to talk about the individual rights, about the ownership of one's country, about participatory politics, the devolution of power to the people, to the localities and to the communities as much as possible. When I grew up in Thailand, at the age of 8 or 9, I thought that every Thai prime minister either must be a field marshal or a general. It was the belief of young Thai children 60, 70, 50 years ago. And I never liked it. Somehow, with the prime minister in the military uniform, give me the feeling as a young child, the element of fear, that somehow a person with the uniform controlling the country and running the country is someone that I have to be afraid of. So I grew up in the atmosphere. I never liked people in uniform to run my life and my country. And today I am 70 years old. I will have to live with a prime minister with his name starting with the word general. It seems that Thailand has not gone far enough. 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, same. Still the general running the country. Maybe so. Maybe the last hurdle that I have to get rid of, to have a civilian elected and truly democratic prime minister. Okay, leave it to that. But the past 60, 70 years or 80 years is not all that negative, at least from the Thai perspective or from the outsider looking into Thailand, in spite of the upheavals and the continued return of the military to the forefront, getting the hem of the government, and always coming out with the excuses that they are the Lord Protector of the nation, Thai nation, of the institution of the monarchy and the institution of religions. In spite of all that, I think the past 83 years and the past 20, 30 years in particular, there is much more political awareness and knowledge about democracy and participatory politics. And I think our civil society organizations are second to none in terms of protecting and expressing their rights, whether the human rights or the environmental protection and sustainability and so on. And the press has been more inquisitive, although they have been influenced by money politics and so on. And we have elected village council, municipalities and provincial and so on. I think overall, in spite of the fact that we still keep on having military coup d'etat, military government, the Thai public, the Thai people in general have become more knowledgeable, aware, and more participatory. And at the end of the day, I still remain optimistic about the future of democracy in Thailand. And I still remain optimistic about the future of our liberal friends and so on. But you have to keep on struggling. At the age of 10 is a military general as prime minister. At the age of 70 is still a general as a prime minister. I never give up the hope. But I hope that we would do it together also in the networking and move the liberal idea forward. Otherwise, at the end of the day, we end up with various forms of authoritarianism. Why should we, as free man, free people, have to live in fear under some sort of suppression and pressure and so on by a few? It's not correct, it's not right, it's not justified, and I think we have every right to fight and to achieve what we have been born with. That is freedom. So thank you very much. ขอบคุณมากครับ